The long ride home. The rhythmic hum of the train filled the empty carriage, the fluorescent lights overhead flickering as if struggling to stay awake. The air was cold, stagnant. Outside the window, darkness stretched endlessly. No city lights, no countryside, no landmarks of any kind. Just blackness, swallowing everything beyond the train's dim glow. Kara stirred awake, blinking in confusion. Her neck ached from dozing off awkwardly against the window. She checked her phone. The screen remained black. No signal, no time display. A dead battery? That didn't make sense. She had charged it before boarding. A chill trickled down her spine as she glanced around. The train car was empty. There had been other passengers before, she was sure of it. A businesswoman with her laptop, a couple murmuring softly to each other, a man reading a book. But now, only silence. Only one other person remained. At the far end of the car, a man sat perfectly still in the last row. His face was barely visible in the dim lighting, but she could see that he was watching her, staring. Her breath hitched. Kara shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to shake the unease creeping into her bones. Maybe he was just another passenger. Maybe he had been there the whole time, and she simply hadn't noticed. Still, something about him felt off. She forced herself to look away, pressing the call button above her seat. No response. No ding. No flashing light. She tried again. Nothing. Panic tightened her throat. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Her gaze flicked back to the man. He hadn't moved, but somehow he seemed closer. Kara's hands gripped the armrest as she slowly stood. The train swayed gently beneath her feet as she made her way toward the front of the car. Maybe the conductor could explain what was happening. Maybe this was some kind of late-night route change, or... She stopped. The door to the next car was locked. Not just locked, there was no sign of a handle. No way to push it open. The emergency exit sign flickered above it uselessly. The train lurched slightly, and she stumbled. A whisper of movement behind her sent an ice-cold chill down her spine. She turned. The man was now several rows closer. He hadn't stood up, hadn't moved in any noticeable way. He was just closer. Kara's heart hammered. "Excuse me," she called, forcing steel into her voice. "Do you know what's going on?" Silence. The man did not answer. He just sat there, his face shadowed, his eyes locked onto hers. A deep, instinctual terror clawed at her gut. Something told her not to look away. She swallowed hard, taking slow, careful steps backward toward her seat. The train lights flickered, just for a second, and in that second he was closer again, right across the aisle. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She turned and ran, back to the conductor's cabin, slamming her fists against the metal door. "Help! Is anyone there?" No answer. Her reflection in the small glass window, wide-eyed, shaking, blurred as a breath of cold air ghosted across her neck. Kara turned. The man stood inches from her now, his face still obscured by shadow, but his lips moved, whispering something just beyond her hearing. She pressed herself against the door, gasping. "What do you want?" He tilted his head slowly. "You already know." The train lurched violently. The world spun, and suddenly Kara was no longer standing. She was sitting, back in her original seat. Her phone was in her lap, the screen lighting up suddenly with a notification. One missed call. MOM. The train was quiet again. The man was gone. She let out a shaky breath, her fingers trembling as she reached for the emergency call button. But before she could press it, she felt it. A presence. Slowly, she turned her head. He was sitting behind her now, close enough to whisper in her ear, "It's time to wake up." The train shuddered violently. Kara gasped as a flood of memories crashed over her. The screeching brakes, the blinding headlights, the impact, the sensation of weightlessness. She remembered the crash. A deep, suffocating silence filled the train car as she turned toward the window. The reflection staring back at her was wrong. Her face was pale, her lips were tinged blue, her skin was cold. The train doors slid open. For the first time, Kara saw something outside the train, a platform bathed in an eerie, flickering glow. The sign above read, "Final Stop." She turned back to the man in the last seat, trembling. His expression softened. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "You've been riding for a long time." Tears welled in Kara's eyes as a cold truth settled over her like a weight she could no longer ignore. She was never going home. She had never survived the crash. And the train wasn't taking her anywhere. It was simply waiting for her to accept the truth. As she stepped off the train, the doors hissed shut behind her. The train rumbled forward, fading into the abyss. A new passenger stirred awake in their seat. Goodbye, Kara. Enjoy the endless darkness, and may you find peace wherever you go.